Imagine trying to change the password on your own Wi-Fi, and minutes later, being surrounded by cops with guns drawn, all because your neighbor assumed you didn't belong. But what happens when the truth comes out? Shocks not just the neighborhood, but the entire nation. This story exposes bias, turns stereotypes on their head, and leads to a twist no one saw coming. Before we dive into this explosive story, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss how one tech-savvy black man's normal day spiraled into a national headline. It was a sunny Saturday morning in a quiet Atlanta suburb, and Malcolm Reese, a 29-year-old cybersecurity expert and entrepreneur, had finally gotten around to fixing a long-overdue issue with his home internet. His smart home system had been acting glitchy all week, lights flickering, speakers muting themselves, cameras randomly disconnecting, and it was driving him nuts. Malcolm had just moved into the upscale neighborhood of Willow Heights, a gated community where he'd bought a newly renovated home after selling his startup for a modest fortune. But despite the manicured lawns and posh facades, he felt the occasional side-eye from his mostly white neighbors, especially from across the street, a woman named Karen Whitmore, blonde, sharp-featured, and always armed with a complaint. Malcolm didn't care. He had better things to focus on, like integrating his new security firewall and reconfiguring the Wi-Fi mesh system. Sitting on his front porch with a laptop and a small toolkit, he connected a new router to replace the outdated model that the previous owners had left behind. But as he was testing signal strength near his driveway where the utility box and smart extender were located, Karen's eyes darted across the blinds. Her lips tightened. She picked up the phone and dialed 911 with practiced swiftness. "Yes, there's a suspicious man outside tampering with wires," she told the dispatcher. "He's in a hoodie, looks aggressive, maybe trying to hack into the neighborhood internet or something." Within minutes, 2 police cruisers screeched up to Malcolm's driveway. Red and blue lights flashed against his windows. Malcolm, confused and startled, raised his hands as the officers jumped out, weapons partially drawn. "Step away from the device, sir," barked one cop. "This is my house." Malcolm said calmly, slowly putting down the router and lifting his hands higher. "I'm changing my Wi-Fi equipment." Karen came out moments later, smug and self-satisfied, arms crossed. "See, I knew something was off," she told the officers. "People don't just mess with wires like that unless they're up to no good." But as the officers began questioning Malcolm and demanding ID, the situation quickly began to unravel. Malcolm not only provided identification matching the address, but also an official city permit for working on external wiring standard for high-end smart homes. Still, the cops weren't convinced, until one of them noticed something unusual on Malcolm's open laptop. ***. Malcolm's screen was a diagnostic map of nearby Wi-Fi networks, and something was wrong, very wrong. Multiple neighborhood signals were being funneled through a rogue access point labeled W Guest Node. Malcolm explained, "I set up this tool to make sure no one was piggybacking on my system, but this right here," he pointed to a blinking IP address, "is intercepting data from over 20 homes, including mine." The officers glanced at each other. This was no longer about a suspected vandal. This was possibly a cybercrime affecting the entire community. "Wait, what are you saying?" one asked. Malcolm clicked a few keys and brought up metadata logs. Someone installed a 30 access node that's siphoning off private data, emails, passwords, security camera feeds. Most people wouldn't catch this unless they were running network audits. The sergeant stepped aside to call in a tech unit, now realizing that the guy they almost cuffed was actually doing the neighborhood a favor. Karen, still watching from her lawn with narrowed eyes, barked, "Oh please, this is some hacker trick. He's just trying to sound smart. What's next? He'll say he's a NASA engineer too." The sergeant turned toward her, unamused. "Ma'am, it appears this gentleman may have just exposed a felony-level data breach." And it might explain the break-ins we've had reported recently. Suddenly, the vibe shifted. The second officer retrieved Malcolm's ID again, looking more closely. "Wait, Reestek?" he said, reading the name on Malcolm's business card. "You're the Malcolm Reese? The one who made that virus-killing patch for the Fortune 500 servers last year?" "That's me," Malcolm nodded. Karen's face dropped. Her smug expression melted into confusion. I didn't know who he was," she stammered. "I was just being careful." "Careful?" Malcolm said, folding his arms. "You didn't even ask me a question. You saw a black man with electronics and called the cops." But as more officers arrived, including a cyber unit, and Malcolm began helping them track the rogue signal, things took a darker turn. The source of the unauthorized access point was traced to a nearby house, and it wasn't Malcolm's, it was Karen's. The tech team ran a line test. The signal traced directly to a booster in Karen's garage concealed behind her gardening tools. One officer asked to inspect it. Karen refused at first, claiming it was private property. But once the team got a warrant issued by the Cybercrime Division, the truth was exposed. Hidden in Karen's garage was a small data harvesting hub modified from commercial mesh tech in disguise to look like a power inverter. Inside, the team found logs of captured data, private emails, streaming histories, and security camera feeds from dozens of homes in the neighborhood. Malcolm stood frozen as the officers carried out the evidence. Karen had been spying on the neighborhood under the guise of safety, but in reality, she'd been collecting information to blackmail and control her neighbors. "No, you don't understand," Karen shouted. "I was protecting the community. I saw what people were doing, the sneaking around, the affairs, the drugs. Someone had to keep order." She sounded increasingly unhinged as the police began reading her rights. But the officers weren't done. Malcolm, noticing timestamps on the data logs, discovered that Karen had even access to vulnerable baby monitor stream and security cam feed belonging to a young family 3 doors down. "This isn't just spying," he said. "It's criminal surveillance and wiretapping." The media caught wind of the story fast. Karen was arrested on felony cybercrime charges. But the bigger twist came when the investigation uncovered that Karen had once worked for a controversial private security firm and had kept her old surveillance tools illegally. She'd lied on HOA applications and background checks. Her entire identity was a web of deception. The story exploded online. Karen called 911 on a black man changing his WAF and got hers hacked by The Truth, became the trending headline. People across the US and UK weighed in, outraged that Malcolm had been targeted while literally saving his neighbors' digital lives. Interviews followed. Malcolm appeared on talk shows, not only to tell his side, but to launch a community awareness campaign on digital privacy and racial bias. The neighborhood HOA issued an apology and unanimously voted to rename the local community center in honor of Malcolm. They called it Reese Commons, but the justice didn't end there. Malcolm started a nonprofit initiative called Secure the Signal, offering free cybersecurity audits in underserved communities. Meanwhile, Karen's trial revealed even more disturbing facts. She had collected files on interracial families, LGBTQ+ couples, and single women she considered unfit for the neighborhood. The case made national headlines, with Malcolm testifying against her not just for himself, but on behalf of every person she'd monitored. In a twist of poetic justice, Malcolm purchased the foreclosure rights to Karen's home after her conviction. He turned it into a digital literacy and ethics education hub. "Sometimes," he said in his closing interview, "the biggest firewall we need isn't digital, it's the one between prejudice and truth." And as the viral video of the police discovering Karen's illegal setup hit 80 million views, one message rang loud across every comment thread and headline: never underestimate who you're calling the cops on, especially when they're smarter, stronger, and more righteous than you'll ever be.